everybody, to Simple Handicap for Thursday, October 31st. Thank you for making me a part of your morning, and thank you for finishing out the month of October, starting your Thursday off with listening to the podcast. Appreciate everybody who stopped by the Week 9 live stream preview yesterday over on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you're on Apple or Spotify this morning listening to the podcast, would encourage you to head over to listen to the Week 9 preview. If you're already on YouTube this morning, love it if you checked it out as well. Good live chat community as always. Went for 90 minutes. It was a bit of a longer show, but answered a lot of questions, got into a lot of topics as well, as we'll keep pushing the Q&A going forward. Let's get to your market rundown for this Thursday, October 31st. Halloween. Scary night for the New York Jets, potentially. Hope not, because I played the Jets yesterday. Was on the fence saying, ended up pulling the trigger. We're in it probably for worse, more so than the better. But we're looking at the Jets as a 2-point favorite at Chris Circa and Buckeye this morning. 2.5 minus 101 at Pinnacle. 1.5 at FanDuel and DK. 42 the total from left to right across the screen. A little bit of defensive help back for the Houston Texans. Not so much for the New York Jets, as we talked about yesterday, down a couple of starters on the defensive side. I'm very curious to see if this number does push through the 2. It does feel like this is the extent of where we're getting to. Talked yesterday on the podcast about how this is the first Thursday night short week game for the Houston Texans coaching staff as well. Don't know if that's being talked about nearly enough for how much those teams typically tend to underperform in those spots. The Jets, despite not being great at game planning against everybody, took advantage of the Patriots in this same scenario a few weeks ago. It was the best week of the Jets season and the best game that they have played. Perhaps we see it again tonight in prime time. Can we get enough of these Jets-Giants primetime games, though? That's a question for everybody. Saw some comments on the live stream. 4 and 33. The last 47 for Jets and Giants games in primetime. My goodness. Let's get to Sunday games. New England on the road at the Tennessee Titans. 3 minus 125. The consensus price across the screen this morning with the total at 38. Drake May back at practice, limited fashion. He has to continue doing so each day of the week to progress through the concussion protocol. All signs point to him being able to come back and play in this game. The Titans with a boost likely to get Tajay Spears back in the backfield, which would be fantastic for them to have in this matchup. As you know, I like the Titans in this game. Chargers on the road at the Cleveland Browns. Good news for the Chargers yesterday as both Johnston and Chark returned in limited basis back to practice. Browns look like they'll have their full complement of offensive line starters up front. Chargers -1, -110 at Chris, Circa, and Buckeye this morning. Pinnacle hanging on to that 2, -106, and then everywhere else 1.5 across the board. Total in this game got as high as 43.5, back to 42.5. This is a total that has been bet over by plenty of pros that I know. Surprised to see a little bit of under money come back into the market since that time, but I can see how, just given the Chargers' scores, how much of an under team the Chargers have been, despite the offensive philosophy change we've seen the last couple weeks. We're looking at, I guess, plenty of reasons just based on priors so far in season as to why you'd want a Chargers under, but I really don't think that plays through here on Sunday. Saints on the road at the Carolina Panthers. Saints now up to a 7.5-point favorite on the news that Bryce Young will be starting again as Andy Dalton's thumb from the car crash still not good to go. Jonathan Brooks looks like he will get to make his debut in the backfield for Carolina as the team around Bryce Young continues to get healthier and healthier each week. This is likely as healthy as we're going to see for the Panthers all season. Let's see if Adam Thielen is also able to return to the lineup. If you see Brooks is in, if you see Thielen is in, knowing that these defensive starters are back as well, and you have Derek Carr in the Saints offense who is coming off of the oblique injury, which we've seen have limitations for quarterbacks returning, I do wonder if now above the 7, there could finally be some backers for the Panthers here at home despite the QB change. Miami on the road at the Buffalo Bills. Bills, a 6-point favorite across the board. This total was as high as 50. We're back down to 48.5 at Circa, 49 left to right elsewhere across the screen this morning as under money comes in on the news potentially that Amari Cooper is less than 100% as he was limited in practice. That was what was noteworthy on the Dolphins side. Seiler, their best defensive lineman, allegedly got punched at practice in the face. Now, there hasn't been a lot of reporting about that, but that is the rumor that is swirling around. I don't know if he's necessarily capable of dealing with that injury without getting surgery. That's a little bit beyond what my area of expertise. From different Twitter doctors that I've seen, it seems unlikely. If he's out again for the Dolphins, That's a big blow to the defensive line, which has really been struggling this season. Looks like it is trending that way at the moment. Dallas on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. This is Atlanta 2.5 across the board with a total of 52, trending slightly lower to 51. It's another Wednesday. You guys have been listening to the show all year. Every Wednesday, these totals in the low 50s, they get bet under. And we see 51.5s back on the board after this was painted 52 for the majority of the week. Deron Bland was activated to the roster. Good chance that he is able to go. Micah Parsons potentially able to go in this game as well. His practice notes today will be very important for his status coming up on Sunday. Denver on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. 9-point favorites of the Baltimore Ravens this morning from left to right across the screen. Very little movement in this game, as we have seen the last about 36 to 48 hours total. Did get bet over yesterday afternoon. Was given out by Rob on his show as well. We saw some movement right after that. We saw some movement trickle on later in the afternoon as we see this number pushed up off of the heels of that. We did get news from Baltimore, who was practicing without Lamar Jackson. Illness number 352 of his career. It just pops up. I don't expect it to be something that impacts his status on Sunday, at least at how it was being reported. Harbaugh had a presser yesterday, and he says he is excited to see both Humphrey and Wiggins back in the secondary playing on Sunday. Pretty good indication that the Ravens are getting those reinforcements in the secondary back in this spot. A little bit surprised to see those 9.5s and the 110 that was on the board go away. We'll see if Lamar is back in practice, if those show back up again after the limit bump comes a little bit later today. Las Vegas on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. 7 is the number for Cincy across the board with a total of 46. Not much movement on the total. We do see another practice day without T. Higgins for Cincinnati after a quad tweak last Friday. Doesn't necessarily bode well for his status this coming Sunday. Indianapolis on the road at the Minnesota Vikings. Expectations are that TJ Hawkinson will make his season debut for Minnesota. This game is painted across the screen at 5.5 with a total that is now touching 47 at circa. The highest number that we have seen so far this week for Sunday Night Football was as low as 45.5 with Richardson. The Flacco news pushed it up, and then there was some money late afternoon yesterday that made this touch 47 for the first time this week. Washington on the road at the New York Giants. If you listen to the pod, you got the number ahead of this one, as we're now at 44 across the board with 44.5. The loan price showing at FanDuel as the highest total on the board this morning. All of the 43s and 43.5s are gone in this market as the over money continues to come in on this game. Chicago on the road at Arizona. Haven't seen the full move for Arizona yet. This is still showing a handful of pick'ems with a few -1s scattered across the board. Looks like this is a game that is going to continue leaning and turning into the Cardinals going off as a favorite once we get to Sunday. No movement on the total, still holding steady at 44.5 this morning. LA Rams on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. This was as high as 2.5 yesterday, and that was enough at a number of the sports books for there to be market resistance, as we see 1.5 now the consensus price across the board, with Pinnacle back to 1 -110. We're seeing Bet Online at 1 -115. For the Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf was not back at practice yesterday, but it was reconfirmed by Coach McDonald that there is optimism that he is going to play on Sunday, which has been the word and the term that was used to describe someone who is going to return so far 5 different times this season, as we talked about yesterday via Greg of the Coach Speak Index. Devin Witherspoon missed practice yesterday. It's a foot injury. He is expected to go. Leonard Williams missed. He is expected to go as well. And then Metcalf is really the guy that's being watched. Fant and Lucas, both off of IR, were limited in practice. If they're able to go, it was going to be a massive boost for the Seahawks offensive line in this game. Detroit on the road at the Green Bay Packers. No practice for Jordan Love. This number holds at 3 -20 with a total of 48. Jordan Love in his press conference says he is optimistic and there is a chance that he can play on Sunday. Now, I don't know if I'm buying that as much as the DK Metcalf stuff, but we do know that Matt LaFleur loves to game the system, so we are kind of in a holding pattern with this game until we get more news about Jordan Love. Jacksonville on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles still 7.5-point favorites, but it looks like both Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis can play in this game on Sunday for Jacksonville. The injury and cluster that they suffered at the wide receiver group last week doesn't look like it will be as impactful as it was looking earlier in the week. We still haven't seen this number come back all the way. And then Monday Night Football is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs still a 9-point favorite across the board. Total was as high as 46. We are now back to 45.5. First practice reports for both of these teams coming out later today. And I would be remiss as I'm doing the podcast and thinking in my head, what did I miss as I went through? Famous line of the show. You never underestimate the loss of a good nose tackle. And Michael Pierce for Baltimore was placed on the injured reserve yesterday. He is going to miss multiple weeks. We'll see what happens to the interior of that defense in a matchup here where you have a Ravens defense struggling to rush the passer, but they have been very good at blocking up against the run. It take Pierce away, maybe that is a bit of a step back for the defense. We shall see. But I wanted to bring that up just because it is a nose tackle injury, and you know that those always find their way into the podcast anytime that it happens. That'll do it for me today. A classic, shorter form episode. Boy, were these nice. And maybe we'll have some, as we have 4 teams on bye next week, but we have one more show to go this Friday. And of course, if you want a deeper dive into each of these games, I just talked about them a little more than 24 hours ago over on the YouTube channel. In the Week 9 live stream preview, you can jump into every game, every question, and every thought that I have on these games. Have a fantastic Thursday, everybody. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. We'll hopefully get a Jets win and cover and talk to you bright and early tomorrow morning here on the show.